Hey guys, I'm Jessie, and I am so excited for this video today because this is actually part 2 of an interview with one of my absolute favorite authors, Sarah Beth Durst. If you haven't seen part 1, I'm going to leave the link to that in the description box. It is over on my friend Sophia's channel from Sophia's Thoughts. Watch part 1, come back here, watch part 2. We had a blast, Sophia and I, interviewing Sarah, and she's just so much fun. We both love her books. I ended up going and picking up more of her middle grade books, like right after the interview, if that tells you anything. So definitely give it a watch, check it out, and just enjoy how amazing and fun she is. And check out some of her amazing books that we are going to talk about right here in part 2 of this interview. Yeah. So we talked, about your process. Is there any book that you had like just the best time writing? Like
a bunch of them. The funny thing is, you can't tell before you start. Like, I always think that any book that I think of writing is going to be super fun to write. Otherwise, why would I write it? And that's not always true. Some of them are really hard. You don't know that till you're like well into it. You're like, oh, yes, I have to plow through this. Okay. But some of them, I would say most of my epic fantasies, actually, particularly the Renthia books, the Queen of Blood and Reluctant Queen in particular, I didn't have bad moments with writing it. It was just a joy to work on. It felt, every time I sat down at my computer, it felt like walking through the doorway to Narnia. It was a really immersive experience, and I loved doing that. So I'd probably pick either Queen of Blood or Reluctant Queen. Queen of Sorrow also felt the same, but I felt the weight of the fact that it was book 3 of a trilogy, and I wanted to get it right. So I had that little voice in my head doing like, make it perfect, which is never helpful when you're writing.
Yeah, it definitely felt very immersive. I'm not a visual reader at all. Like I don't see pictures in my head when I'm reading or anything like that, but I really felt like I was in this forest and these spirits were going to come and kill me because I was in the forest.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I just realized I just cheered for like spirits that are going to come kill you. I don't actually want to.
Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's something that's probably quite common with fantasy readers, is that we like there to be consequences. Like, it's not, you don't feel that pressure if you know that everyone's just going to make it out and it's going to all be sunshine and rainbows at the end. Like, there has to be some consequence.
They definitely do not make it all out in Queen of Blood. I had some people that had only read my kids' books, and then they read Queen of Blood, and they're like, Sarah, why? I'm like, it's in the title. Come on. This wasn't a surprise. Queen of Blood.
Yeah. That's awesome.
The part of the story behind why Queen of Blood goes the way it does, without giving spoilers, is that I originally started, after I fell on my face at that writing retreat, I originally started writing what would eventually be the Reluctant Queen. I wrote like the first 90 pages of the Reluctant Queen, and that's what I sold the trilogy on. My agent sent it out, and the man that eventually became my editor, David Pomerico, who is a wonderful editor, asked if he could talk to me on the phone. I'm like, sure. And he said, I have a question for you. Can this be book 2? I'm like, sure. So I wrote book 1, The Queen of Blood, knowing where Reluctant Queen was going to begin. So I knew who was going to be alive and who wasn't when I was writing Queen of Blood.
I love that.
So that kind of did determine the ending. And I wrote an apology letter to some of those characters after I finished the book. I'm like, I love you, but you couldn't live. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could literally create characters knowing that they would have to die because they're not in the second book.
I was like, yes, it was like emotionally difficult for me. But I had no choice because I really liked what I'd already written for book 2. So,
well, you gotta do what you gotta do.
And it was I knew it felt right for the character, but it was hard. I cried.
Oh.
I did too. So
Okay, sorry. Yay. I don't know how I'm supposed to react to that.
I'm a crier. To me, if I cry in a book, it's a good thing. Like I'm an
I'm
easy
kind
crier
of
in general. Like
me too. I'm a sympathetic crier. Like if someone is crying in real life or on TV, I cry too, so they won't be alone or something.
yeah,
I don't know why. How does that help
every
anyone?
time.
But yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm a monster and I cry at nothing.
Well, that's good too.
That's my 8-year-old.
That's
Like
good.
I'll
That
be
means you're
crying at a movie and she's like, what? Like the
yeah.
end of Toy Story 3. Like
Oh, how could yeah. I
she
definitely
looks at
lost
me like,
it.
what are you doing, Mom?
Yeah, no, that's me. I remember watching Watership Down in a 6th grade English class and just losing it, like in front of all. And like 6th grade is not where you want to be sobbing in the middle of class. I was, yay. The rabbits were singing a very sad song. So, well, the rabbits weren't actually singing. It was Art Garfunkel. But, you know, rabbits were sad.
They were
So,
sad.
they were sad bunnies. And Sophie, it's
So-
much better to like be able to read in public without totally losing it. So I applaud that.
I mean, this is true. It's good to be able to read on the tube and not have to fear bawling in public. So that's good. You mentioned before about someone saying that they had started with your middle grade and then read your adult. So have your children read any of your books, and which is their favorite, and how about your husband?
They have. And I don't want to ask them which is their favorite because then I'll feel bad for the other ones. But I can tell you the first one that they read was The Girl Who Could Not Dream. Wait, I'll show you. Have it? The Girl Who Could Not Dream. This is one of my kids' books, and it's about a girl whose parents own a dream shop where they buy, sell, and bottle dreams, and her best friend is a monster named Monster.
Oh,
And Monster was one of my favorite characters that I've written because he was one. Usually my characters evolve during the writing process. You know, I kind of audition different personalities. Like I'll try a scene one way and be like, and try a different character. And I'm like, you may stay, you're cut. But with Monster, he's this snarky, cupcake loving, many tentacled, fuzzy creature.
Oh, cute.
right?
Like, tell my story and feed me cupcakes. I'm like, okay. So he was a lot of fun to write, and my family enjoyed him a lot. We actually listened to it on audiobook, and boy, is it a strange sensation to listen to a book that you've written on an audiobook.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's familiar. Oh, wait, no, I wrote that. Right. It's cool. It's cool though.
That's awesome. I bet that would be really weird. Be like, whoa, I wrote that, but someone else is reading it. Like,
Right? Yeah. But it's neat. And I often will talk to the audiobook narrator about the pronunciation of things. Because there's a lot of made up names and
Yeah.
words. And sometimes they'll ask me, like, okay, how do you pronounce this? I'm like, I don't know. I just read it. How would you like to pronounce it?
I've always wondered that about like the pronunciation of like fantasy names in general. It's like, you know, how do you hear it in your head compared to like how everyone else says it? Like,
Right? Yeah, there's no wrong way. Whatever works for you. I'd say my husband's favorite is The Reluctant Queen. I dedicated that one to him. Probably his favorite. So.
I do like
And he's been my biggest supporter.
oh,
He's
that's always important.
It's hugely important. I mean, he's shared my dream from the beginning. I'm very grateful and feel very lucky for that because it is a lot of being a writer is believing in yourself and telling yourself you can do this, and having someone else also saying you can do this is lovely.
Yeah.
Also, lots of chocolate helps. That's the other thing.
Yes.
Never say no to that, huh?
Never. I know one of my favorites, actually my first book that I read of yours was The Bone Maker. I had read it, you know, earlier this year. I ended up getting an arc from NetGalley. And then I was like, okay, now I have to read everything else.
Okay,
But I loved I loved The Bone Maker in the fact that it was older characters and it was really what happens after the end of the story. Like, I just really appreciated that. And one thing I had kind of wondered after the end of that is, do you think we'll ever get a prequel of what happened before? Like, I know we get a lot of snippets of, the 25 years before, but like,
I never want to say no to things because who knows where one's mind would take you. But I did not, that one I definitely did not write with the intention of ever doing a prequel, because in my mind, the prequel is every Dungeons and Dragons, Dragonlance, 5 characters. And if you look at the characters closely enough, you can see that they are the paladin, the bard, the ranger, the thief. That's what the concept began as, the 5 standard D&D party characters. They've gone through their classic epic battle that everyone has read. Where are they 25 years later? Because you don't hear about that. That was a story that really interested me, that I wanted to tell. Mm-hmm. So probably not a prequel, but maybe.
Well, I definitely loved that and thought it subverted a lot of tropes too. Like we were talking about at the beginning, like the trope subversion, because you're like, oh wait, it doesn't just end when the last battle ends. And I also really liked how the villain, and then some of the, I guess villains in some of your other stories, like they're really relatable as well. It's like you can see them being terrible, but then you're also like, wow, they kind of have a point there.
Yeah.
Like, especially with Bone Maker. That was the one where I was like, wow, I can kind of get his point.
I find those, the most interesting villain for me to write is the villain that thinks they're the hero. And they're just like obviously wrong, but they are convinced that they're the hero.
Yeah.
So what is next?
What is next? Well,
what do we have in the pipeline?
Next up is called The Shelterlings, and it comes out in June, and the cover's amazing, and the book doesn't exist yet. I can't hold it up and show it to you because it comes out in June. But it is a kid's book for ages 8 to 12, or whoever else wants to read it, honestly. I write for me, so. And the main character is a talking squirrel named Holly, who has the magical power of being able to conjure pastries. So, whenever you need it, she can have a muffin or croissant for you, but she doesn't find this a particularly useful power. So she lives in the shelter for rejected familiars, along with a whole lot of other talking animals who have similar kinds of less than useful powers.
That sounds really, like so much fun to write,
because I really am very fond of talking animals, and there are a lot of so many of them in this book. Awesome. And other books I've written, for instance, Ice. Wait, do I have that here? Hold on, I'll show you this. This is Ice. This is based on East of the Sun and West of the Moon, except set in modern times. She's a modern Arctic research scientist, and he's a talking polar bear.
Oh.
And he turns human at important moments. But I had talking animals in this book that are not in this book, and I have no idea which ones are actually in the final version because I don't remember.
That's great.
But Shelterlings, I kept getting to add more and more and more talking animals, and it was so much fun to write.
That's awesome.
I'm excited for people to read it.
I always love a talking animal.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with it.
Yeah.
Any animal companion in any book, I always just want them to be real and in my life. And I will often hunt down my cats and be like, right, I need to cuddle and pretend that you're this talking animal from this book or that book. Yeah.
The most reader emails I've ever gotten about characters were before The Queen of Sorrow, book 3 of the Queens of Renthia came out. Not caring, not about any of the human characters. They're just like, please don't kill the wolf. So many emails.
Yeah.
I think that thought went through my head a few times as well.
Yeah, I like talking. Well, I want a talking animal sidekick. There's definitely part of being a writer that is wish fulfillment. I mean, I get to write about flying on dragons and facing the big bad and having the talking animal sidekick character and a pet wolf and all of this stuff that I normally would not have in my life. Like even if I lived in a fantasy world, I would definitely be the extra that was the demonstration for why the evil is bad. Like the first one to get eaten by a zombie. That's me. But not in fiction. In fiction, I can go with the heroes.
I definitely would be also like the first to die.
Yeah.
I'd be too curious. I'd be like, but what's going on over there?
No, I'm just like incompetent. I would not know how to light the fire. I would like trip, as we said, and then the thing would eat me, and that would just be the end of my story. And they'd be like, oh, how sad. Look, they ate that peasant girl. I guess we should go get the actual heroes now.
Yeah, a common question readers get is, oh, if you could go into a fantasy world, which one would you pick? I'm like, none of them. I would survive less than 5 minutes. I want to read about them and I want to figuratively be there, but I never want to literally be there.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Renthia. Like, it's awesome. I don't want to go there though.
No.
It's gorgeous, but like really deadly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I would get speared by like a tree spirit in 5 seconds. Like it would just happen.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, usually when I answer that question, it's always with a lot of caveats. Like, I'd like to go to Narnia, but only when none of the bad guys are there, and just like have tea with the beavers or Fontumnus. Like, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we can take out all the bad stuff that's going to kill me.
Yeah.
And then I'll go visit.
Like the tourist version
of
going to Pern or Valdemar or Middle Earth or wherever.
Like, yeah, the theme park version.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. With none of the actual bad stuff happening, that would be.
Right. Exactly. I would like to avoid the death and trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of your characters must be quite heavily traumatized.
You feel a little bad about that, but it's good for them, except for the ones that die. Then it's not good for them. But the ones that live,
yeah,
it helps them grow. I mean, that's one of the things you get to do when you're writing a fantasy novel. I mean, it's I often describe fantasy books as the extreme sport of all literature, because you're really pushing these humans to the absolute brink. They're experiencing things dialed up to 11. Now, whether you're talking about power or love or revenge or whatever it is, the theme that you're exploring, you're allowed to do it to the absolute utmost. And which is really fun for me as a writer and as a reader, less fun for the occasional characters.
Yeah, I can imagine like I can imagine like the kids in Queen of Sorrow, like those poor children.
A rough day.
I know. But I love how like believable they are as children.
Oh, excellent.
Because a lot of times we read books about kids and I'm like, but this is not a child.
No.
Like a kid wouldn't act like this, or like this is a 40-year-old, 8-year-old that someone has written about. Like, and I love that I'm like, these feel like kids. They're kind of annoying sometimes, but you really love them.
I think the trick is to think of your characters who are kids, whether you're writing adult, whether you're writing kids, whatever, as people that are just at a particular stage in life. But they have wants and fears and needs and things that amuse them and things that don't, the same as your adult characters. And if you approach it thinking, I'm going to write a child, you're in trouble. You have to approach it writing, I'm doing this character who is this age. And how do they see the world? Because otherwise you end up with a stock character. Nobody wants that. They want real people. Otherwise you can't go on the journey. It doesn't matter how cool the world is or how great your story is. If you don't care about the people, you're not going to go.
Yeah,
I definitely agree.
That's how I felt about the characters in Fire and Heist as well, is that they read like teenagers. Like they were doing things that I could imagine, well, not myself doing as a teenager because I wasn't as cool as that, but like,
right,
it's the reality of my situation. But I could imagine those kinds of teenagers doing, and that was actually the first book of yours that I read. I got it in a Fairy Loot box, however long ago that was now.
Yeah. Oh, that was fun.
Yeah. It's a great book.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, I'll hold that one up. Wait, let me find it.
I know, I didn't get the fairy loot of that one.
Yeah, it's Ocean's 11 with Were Dragons.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one, you're asking about which books were easy to write. That was really hard.
Was it?
It was. And it's funny because I didn't think it was going to be, because it's one of my lighter ones, because it's a heist. You know, it's very fast, it's very snarky, it's very like, but heists are hard because they have to make sense. All the pieces have to come together. So many revisions on that. Well, I do many revisions on all of them. I do like 30 drafts on everything, but that one was a lot of chocolate, right?
Interesting.
Well,
you can't tell.
I know.
Good. Yes.
The finished product is always fantastic. I don't think I've read one yet that I have been like, at all. No.
No, me neither.
They're all very different, but I think they all have sort of a mix of, I try to put, you know, the adventure, the fantasy, the humor, the hope is kind of my running theme. There's always hope in my books. I do optimistic fantasy. I don't do grimdark. I think there's a place for grimdark, but that's not what's in my head and my heart. I want to see characters conquer the impossible evil.
Yeah.
I want people to close the books and feel like there's magic and wonder in the world and feel like they're stronger. So I think that's what books can be. I don't think they all need to be that, but they can give people an escape in a good way. People talk about escapist fiction like it's some kind of bad thing, and I think it's an essential thing. It's what lets you cope with the rest of everything that's going on, is if you can go away for a little while and then come back and be ready to face things again, because you just went and faced a dragon or a skeleton army or whatever it was, and you didn't get eaten by the sea monster. So maybe you won't get eaten by that sea monster over there in your actual life.
I love that. And yeah, people do. I know, you know, probably Sophia as well. Like, you know, you get that, especially online, that discourse of like real fiction, and you read fantasy, and it's like, but it's real fiction too. Like,
it's important fiction. I think I'm such like the fantasy. I mean, honestly, all fiction is fantasy. A realistic fiction, they're trying to trick you into believing that their version of the real world is the real world. That's still fantasy. Everybody's
right. It's all a fantasy.
Yes, just
sometimes there's no dragons.
Yeah, exactly.
Who doesn't want dragons?
I know. Love a dragon.
When people ask me like, why do you read fantasy? Why not read like literary fiction or non-fiction or something? And I always say, like, I have enough real life in my real life. I don't want more of that when I'm reading. I want to go to some mystery place where there's talking animals and dragons and magic and flying and have a fun time. I think
books should be fun. I mean, they don't all have to be fun because they're not all serving the same purpose and they're not all meeting the need of the same reader, but there should definitely be a lot of books out there that are fun.
I agree.
Same.
I feel like they think like once you hit an adult age, they're like, you should stop reading. Like, no, like I read all the, you know, fairy books and Little Giant, like as a kid. So why would I not want to read that as an adult too? Like,
right? Somebody asked me once in an interview, how have your reading taste changed now that you're grown up? And I was like, they were supposed to change because it didn't.
No. And then when you have kids, it's like you get to be a kid again yourself and experience those things once more. Because like I'll read, you know, middle grade and like lower books like with my daughter. So it's like we get to experience it, you know, childhood again.
Yes, and you get to introduce them to the things that you love. It's cool. And revisit it again. Though it is funny when you reread a book that you loved as a kid and you hadn't looked at it for several decades, and you're like, oh yeah, no, that wasn't what I remember.
I've had that experience recently, actually.
Like, missed that. Like, okay.
Like, yeah, I don't remember that, but okay.
No, yeah, which is fine. Like, there should be layers in a book. It should hit you different ways when you're different ages. And a good book should have stories for everybody. in it, you know.
Yeah, I really
That's what
I like reading middle grade books as an adult because I feel like it's easy. It's easy to read because it's at a much lower, hopefully much lower
Well, they're
level than
shorter
my
too,
reading ability.
like.
Yeah, they're shorter. They're so much more whimsical. I don't know. There's just something really comforting about reading middle grade books. I can't imagine ever not reading them. That even
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. In middle grade, you're allowed to be silly and sincere in the same paragraph. You don't,
Yeah.
whereas if you're writing for an older audience, there's a certain level of irony that is always going to be there. But in kids' book, there can be an innocence. You can have something be, make you cry and laugh simultaneously, and there's a power in that, which is cool.
Yeah. I think we should all just, read for fun and enjoy what we like.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's
Like what you
important.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, people shouldn't have to feel like they have to apologize. Like, oh yeah, that's just my guilty pleasure. I hate the phrase guilty pleasure. It brings you joy. That makes it important and good, whatever it is.
Right. I agree.
I have strong feelings about that.
I think that's one that we get asked a lot too. Like I know in doing book videos, people are like, well, what's your guilty pleasure read? And I'm like, I don't really have one. I just
No.
not embarrassed of any of the books I read.
Yeah.
Like if that's what we're getting at, like
The only
Yeah.
thing I do worry about is reading smut scenes on the tube in case someone's like reading it over my shoulder. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm not doing anything.
yeah. I've had that, not exactly the same, but like I was reading the graphic novel Saga at my daughter's gymnastics practice, and I didn't realize it was pretty adult, and I'm like reading it and I'm like, oh, these moms sitting behind me are gonna be like, what is she looking at? Because it's a graphic novel and it's a graphic novel.
Yep. And I'm definitely one of those people that if I see other people reading books, I'm always like, what are they reading?
Yeah, me too.
Same. I'm always like, what you got
Me too.
there?
Yeah.
Will we be friends?
Yeah. Yeah, a person gets out the book and I'm always like, what is it?
Yeah. It's always like when I'm watching TV shows or movies and they have books sitting somewhere, I'm like, oh, whose titles are those? Do I know those people?
Yeah.
Well, I, for one, can't wait to read your next book that you have coming out.
Yeah.
Like,
Me too.
Thank you. Thank you guys for reading my books, and I'm glad you like them.
I'm super looking forward to kind of going through the backlist now that I
Mhm.
feel like I'm caught up on some of the newer stuff.
Yeah. I'm excited to read some more of the younger, the middle grade and kids
Yeah,
books.
me too. Me
I
too.
hope you guys like them. I had fun writing. I
Yeah.
had fun writing all of them. I mean, I wouldn't have written them if I didn't love writing them. It takes so long to write a book that if you're not in love with it, you really shouldn't be writing it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, not that you have to love it every single day you sit down to write. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. There's some days you sit down to write and you're like, what are verbs? I don't remember verbs. And that's fine. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your book or your brain. It just means that you need to write more and the verbs will come.
Yeah. I can imagine that writing a book, you also have to read that book a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you do. Yes, you do. Often when I'm revising, I'll get to a sentence and I'm like, I know the perfect word to go here. And I put it in, I read 2 sentences later and the word is there. Like, oh, that's why I thought it was a right word. I do love the part in revision where you can see, I mean, it's sort of like when you start writing a novel, it's like you're looking into this room and all you can see through is this little hole. And then the next draft is wider, and then it's a window and a door, and then by the end you're standing inside. And I love that part when you can see it all around you, and you can see if I pluck, I'm really mixing metaphors here, but if you pluck one thread, you can see how it ripples down throughout. Like that's the most fun part of it for me, is when it starts really coming to life. I love that stage when you've realized there's now something that didn't exist in the world before, and now it does. And I love your dog. Hi to your dog.
Oh,
Just passed by.
my three-legged old lady
Aw.
out there.
Very sweet.
It's still so funny to me, Jessie, that your dog is three-legged and both of my cats are three-legged as well.
Yeah,
Oh, that's bonding.
it is.
Yeah.
Or they were all attacked by the same monster. I don't know which.
Let's hope not.
Right.
No, we don't need that.
Nah.
Oh, that's sweet though. I love that. How did you guys meet?
On YouTube, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yay, internet.
I know.
Yeah.
It's been a really great community, like meeting a lot of other
Yeah.
people with like similar interests and like who also read fantasy. I think a big thing was during like 2020 when everyone's at home and like, reaching for connections with people. We're like, well, I'm going to start talking to a camera and put it out there on the internet and see if I can talk to other people who also like to read about dragons and fairies and
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that.
because I don't have a lot of people in my in-person life who read, and even less of them who actually read fantasy. And that was a big part of why I wanted to start my YouTube channel, was so that I could meet other people who also like reading the kinds of things that I like to read. And as Jessie says, it's so nice to kind of, and I have friends all over the world now because of this, so it's really, really cool.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. It's you can always tell if a person's gonna be a good person if they love a book.
I agree.
Agreed.
I agree.
Agreed.
And I think the bookish side of YouTube is probably one of the nicest. I mean, just some of the nicest people I've met. Like Sophia said, I now have friends all around the world, and like to the point where like I would feel comfortable like going to London and being like, "Hey, you want to meet up for lunch? Like, I happen to be in your town."
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. That's really cool. Yeah. There's so many good people out there. But
Well, thank you so much again for coming and
Yes.
speaking to us. It's been so amazing talking to you.
thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for answering all of our deep burning questions.
Well, thank you. And thank you everybody for listening.
Yes. And everybody go check out Sarah Beth Durst's books. There's
Yes,
plenty to choose
please.
from, no
There
matter
are.
what you like.
Definitely check them out.
I might have a soft spot for the Bone Maker, but
Don't ask me to pick a favorite. I can't do it.
Don't ask me either. People always ask me that. And I'm like, that's like choosing between my children. I'd have to apologize to the rest. I need to do that.
right?
Yeah.
Although I will say some days I say the dog's my favorite kid.
Hmm.
Depends on my mood that day, which kid's my favorite. And how they're acting.
Yeah, when Haruki's meowing at me at 5 a.m. because he wants breakfast, Shinji is my favorite cat.
Right?
Yeah. That's really cute.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Sophia and I had a blast interviewing Sarah Beth Durst. Like, she is so kind and so sweet, and her books are amazing. My daughter has already started reading some of the middle grade books that I ended up picking up, so definitely a win there as well. Highly recommend you go check out some of her books. Queen of Blood, Bone Maker, Race the Sands, any of her middle grade, Fire and Heist, like, they're all fantastic, and I highly recommend them. And again, thank you, Sarah, for agreeing to do this interview with Sophia and I. We had so much fun, and, always up to do it again anytime you are. So hopefully everybody had a great time. I know we did, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.